see that everyone. Thank you, Caitlin. This is why it's good to have a team on these virtual events. And I see in scrolling through all of the students and staff and faculty who have joined us that everyone has followed our housekeeping notes along the side to mute yourself, to remove any distractions, and to turn off your video to help us support the bandwidth. There will be a period where you can turn it on for some Q&A, but for now we'll ask that you leave it off. So I think we may as well get started. We've been sitting steady at the same number for a minute or so here, and if people trickle in after we've started off with some of the opening stuff, that is just fine. So thank you so much everyone for being here today. It is very exciting to be kicking off the second day of our week-long virtual Safety Days event. And today looking specifically at equity, diversity, and inclusion with our panel discussion today. So my name is Rochelle. I'm going to be hosting the session, and I am a member of the Planning Days Safety Committee this year. And while I'm not a technical staff member or an engineer by any means, as we heard yesterday with PCL, safety is everybody's job. So I'm happy to be a part of the planning committee and a part of today's session and kicking off a really great panel discussion. So my role in the college is actually in external relations, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying that I work with the partners who are external to the university. So that includes alumni and industry partners, but more specifically, I work with those who want to support students, who want to give you a greater experience and the very best education. So it's my absolute pleasure today to be welcoming our newest event partner, Crescent Point Energy, as a Safety Days event partner and session host of our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion session. So with that, oh, sorry, one second. Here we are. So as we kick off our session today, while we may be, gathering from a variety of locations, we want to, as we gather, acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to the First Nation and Métis ancestors and place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. So I will be acting as host, and today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, Dr. Akindele Odeshi. And Akindele is our new Associate Dean Academic and Professor in Mechanical Engineering, and his background working across 3 continents with very different cultures brings a welcome diversity of perspectives to guide our panel discussion today. So thank you for being here, Dr. Odeshi, and I will hand off the floor to you to continue and introduce our panelists today. So with that, I will stop sharing screen so that we can see faces, because that's always preferred, isn't it? One moment. Here you are, Dr. Odeshi.
Yeah, thank you, Richelle. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here guiding this panel discussion today. I was asked to join this conversation on behalf of the college, so I can also provide my perspective as a professional engineer with an international career. And I can also give some information about my own experience in inclusion and belonging as a newcomer with my family moving from one different country to another over the years, having worked in Nigeria, Germany, and later in Canada. I started off my career with my bachelor and master's degree from Nigeria. And I worked briefly in Nigeria before I moved on to Germany, where I did my PhD. So by the time I left Nigeria to go and do my PhD in Germany, I had no idea, no knowledge of German language, not even Guten Tag. I never knew the meaning of anything. And so by the time I got to Germany, I went to the language school for 6 months for intensive course in German language. After completing that, I moved on to the university to complete my PhD. So before I left Nigeria, I never knew what it means to be a minority because I was always in the majority group. But on getting to Germany, I discovered that, okay, I was in the minority. But I'd like to share with our audience today what actually worked for me and what has continued to work for me up to now. When I got into my university in Germany, as somebody who was struggling with the German language, only 6 months learning how to speak the language, my professor, somebody who embraced EDI, and all my colleagues there also as well. But I needed to play my own part. The atmosphere was very welcoming. People were ready to include me in everything that they were doing. That was inclusive. But then I need to develop sense of belonging, because one thing is for the organization to be inclusive, to embrace equity and diversity. Another thing is for those who are in the minority group also to develop the good sense of belonging. And so what I did was to throw myself completely into the culture. I want to know more about the people. I was interested in making as many friends as I could within the new environment. So I didn't want to see myself as an outsider. I joined everything that I need to join to become an insider. I work with the colleagues. I joined them in drinking coffee. Even though I was not drinking coffee before I left Nigeria, I was used to drinking only tea. But I know my colleagues would gather together during the lunch for coffee. So I was not going to stay outside. So I learned to drink coffee. And that habit developed it today. You see my table now, I'm drinking coffee here. But that helped me. Even evening of games, I didn't isolate myself. The society was welcoming. I developed sense of belonging, and I want to be included in everything. So what the German call fire bend. My colleagues from time to time will gather in the evening to have fun and games together. I did not isolate myself. And as a result of doing that, my skill in German language developed very rapidly. By the time I completed my program, I was able to write a good PhD thesis in German language, even though that was a new language for me. And I defended my thesis in German language. I was attending national conference, making my presentation in German. All these were possible because the society embraced equity, diversity, and inclusion. But I myself, I came with a sense of belonging, that this is the society I belong to. I'm going to throw myself in there and be part of it. And so I became an insider and not an outsider. Up till now, I still go back to that same university because one of my friends in the group that time is now the dean of the college. They also, from time to time, they invite me to come and give a talk to the students and talk. I must admit my German language is not as proficient as it used to be. When I go back now, I speak in English. But to get to that stage, I had to develop a good sense of belonging. So if there's anything I want to tell our students who are listening here, irrespective of where you come from, you need to develop a sense of belonging. You're a female student, dominated by a class of many male students. You need to develop some belonging. Don't allow anybody to push to the background. You must step forward to be part of it. And that's what I like to say. I remember I was looking at student feedback, a student that graduated years ago. And I read the comment of a female student who complained that she was in a design team, only the female student in that design team. And the male student there just thought that all she could do was to write notes. And they were pushing out to the background, thinking they're the only one who could do the design and carry the hammer. And my comment today is that dive into it, do whatever has to be done to make sure that you are included. And that's what I want to say. So today we are here to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, of what we call EDI in our college. And so our college is a welcoming group of engineering panel. I want to welcome every member of the panelists today who are here to share their experience, and our students who are here who will be builders in the industry. Through this conversation, we hope to build an understanding of barriers and issues people experience in their daily lives that go unnoticed, and provide you with some new language and understanding to apply appropriately in your academic and professional career. So we have some ground rules I will quickly go over. We have two ground rules I want to share with us. before entering into this conversation together. We hope to hear from students and answer your questions. In this spirit of equity, diversity, and inclusion, we request questions or comments from minority or marginalized speakers first, so that we can hear them out. Number two, please consider the question you are going to ask. Peer review it with your friend. Ask yourself if the question is good. Is it a question or a statement? Can others learn from this question? So during this event, you can ask your questions in person by raising your hand, or you can put your questions in the chat. We encourage those who are asking questions to self-identify as a minority or underrepresented demographic, but you do not need to specify in any way. Doing this will allow us to amplify the voices here that are traditionally underrepresented in the profession. It gives all of us an opportunity to hear perspectives that are outside of our own, to give us a new way of seeing things. As a community of problem solvers, this can only be a good thing. And with that, it is my pleasure to begin our formal program and introduce our guest panelists. I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves, to tell us who you are, how you got into engineering, and where you are now. I will ask you each the same question to open. Why is diversity important to you? I will start by welcoming Jamili Cognet, who is here on behalf of Crescent Point Energy. Thank you for being here, Jamie. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Lee Cognet with Crescent Point Energy. Like was mentioned, I'm a small town Saskatchewan girl born and raised. I went to the University of Regina. In 2010, I graduated with a petroleum engineering degree. From there, I went to Estevan for 5 years, Estevan, Saskatchewan, and worked for an oil company there where I spent the time there being a production engineer and an operations engineer. And then in 2015, I went over to Crescent Point and have been in the team lead operations engineering position for the last couple of years. I'm the team lead of North Dakota and Southeast Saskatchewan. And I currently live in Weyburn with my husband, who also works at Crescent Point, and our 2 daughters that are 6 and 4. And to answer your question to why is diversity important to me, I have a couple things that come to mind. The first thing for me being part of a team and developing teams is just different views and perspectives and experience around the table make the most efficient team, I believe. A quote I heard once was, if 2 people around the table are thinking the same thought, you don't need one of those people. And that really resonated with me when it came to having a really efficient team and tackling all those perspectives and ideas prior to executing a project. So it's really important to be in a team setting. And then the second reason why diversity is important to me is also I have 2 daughters, and I want them to think that they can do anything. I don't want them to be pigeonholed a certain direction because they're part of a minority or a diverse group. I want the kids to think that they can be anything. And to me, them having mentorship and support and opportunities when they get older, if I can be a piece of that going forward, it's really important to me to help develop that.
Thank you, Jamie. Diversity of opinion. That's really quite a very important point there. Next, I want to welcome Chacha Kokera. Chacha, thank you for joining us today. Please introduce yourself to our students and tell us also why diversity is important to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Sasha Koga, and I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, and I moved to Canada when I was 15. After a couple years of high school, I entered University of Saskatchewan College of Engineering. Graduated in 2012. I completed a professional internship program through the college with SaskPower here in Saskatoon. And then upon graduation, I went to Alberta for a few years. Worked there as a design engineer and project manager for their utility company, Altolink. And 5 years ago now, I made a move back to Saskatchewan with my wife, and Now we have 2 kids. I worked as a construction specialist and for transmission group here in Saskatoon, once again with Sask Power, and I recently switched jobs to be a project manager for the maintenance crews covering all the north in Saskatchewan. So the reason why I want to be here, why I wanted to be here, why diversity is important to me, I was really lucky to work in companies that valued those concepts, and I saw how effective that can be and how productive it can be in organizations. And obviously, being a new immigrant myself, that's in the sense of being part of a large group while still maintaining, my identity is very important for me. So, and Jamie, I really like your note about your daughters, and I'm proud, the father of a daughter as well, and have a proud father of a son. So I want to make sure that the gender stereotypes, or they're not restricted in their future lives as well. So thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sasha. It's good to be part of a big picture and still not losing our identity. Very important point there. Next, I'm pleased to welcome Katia. Sophia, Katia, tell us about yourself and why diversity is also very important to you.
Thank you. Yes, so my name is Katie Sapia. I grew up in Saskatchewan. I was born, raised, and still live just outside of Saskatoon. I attended the University of Saskatchewan, and while attending the U of S, I got pregnant with my first child in my 3rd year, and then I had my second child in my 5th year, and then I graduated in 2014. After that, I took a year off for mat leave, and then I joined a private consulting firm where I worked part-time until 2019, where I joined the city of Saskatoon as a transportation engineer, where I now work full-time. Diversity, I would say, is really important to me because it brings different viewpoints to the table. It can help us broaden our horizons, and especially in the workforce as project managers and engineers, it's important for us to be able to view things from different angles and have different views on things so that we can effectively solve problems in a way, in different manners, so we don't get stuck in a rut and keep doing the same thing over and over again. We can't change if we don't see things from different views. And of course, I echo Jamie's comment about with my children, I want them to be able to do whatever they want without the barriers. And yes, that's my view on diversity there.
Thanks, Katie. That's profound. We all need, opinion, views from different perspectives, and that actually help different organizations. Thank you, everyone, for those great introductions and starting reflection. Now we go straight into our questions. The first question I have for us today is, why do so many groups continue to be underrepresented in engineering? We have different groups that are actually underrepresented in engineering. Why do you think that continue to exist? I'll start with Jamie.
Yeah, so this question makes me think, I guess, just a personal experience that I've had. When I first came out of high school, I liked science and math, so I went into engineering. But I immediately went into environmental engineering because it had a higher percentage of women, and that's where I felt most comfortable. So I will allude a little bit more to gender inequality or bias, just because that's what I'm most familiar with. But when I went into environmental engineering, the first year we were with a whole, everybody was together, so all the groups were together, and I made a group of friends, and we were looking for a summer position, and somebody said there's a oil field battery operating position. And I immediately counted myself out for that position. I was like, no, that's 100% men. I didn't feel comfortable going into that. And I counted myself out, and my friend asked me why, and I didn't really have a good answer. So I challenged myself out of my comfort zone, and I applied for the job. I got it, and I absolutely loved it. And I ended up switching my major to petroleum when I came back in the fall. I worked there a couple summers and winters filling in. And looking back, that's what kind of made me think about why groups are underrepresented in engineering. I think I didn't really have the confidence to push myself. You know, it wasn't a comfort zone to go into something that was 100% meant for me. And at a young age, I feel like you're kind of sent in this direction of what people expect you to be. And I felt like I had never seen another woman in a battery operating position, so I wasn't inspired to do that. I felt, uncomfortable. So that's what makes me think why they're underrepresented. And so when I think about that, I think we need to make sure we're reaching out to young people at a young age to get rid of those barriers, because I think that started at a young age for me. And also, once those biases are in place, or you think you count yourself out, it's really hard to push yourself out of that comfort zone to go down that path. So that's why I think people are underrepresented. Just the confidence, and from an early age, you're kind of directed in a certain way because of what people think you should do.
Thank you so much, Jamie. That I think that I can echo that. I remember when I was in high school, and I don't know where this stereotype come from, that in the physics class you find the boys want to go and do physics while the ladies want to go and do biology. And I when I look back, I can see many students in biology class, many people in the biology class who could do better in physics than the boys, but people just separate themselves. I don't know where this sentiment is coming from, that physics, boys should go do physics, ladies should go do biology. Unless you do physics, you can't find yourself in engineering. Now, Kathy, any thought on these two, why some groups are underrepresented in engineering?
So yeah, as like with Jamie, I'll go with my own experience here. I almost didn't go into engineering. I was actually registered in commerce. And the day before the deadline, my teacher, high school teacher, told me, no, you have to do engineering, change your major, like do that now. And so I did. And I didn't think engineering was something I was going to want. I had a vision for my life of a family and a small career, and I didn't necessarily see engineering fitting into that. And then as now that I'm working the career, and I was able to work part-time and be able to work around my children's events and everything, I realized that this is something that you can have a family and do. But I realized that talking to other women, and it's not well advertised. The engineering industry has not done a good job of advertising and marketing to itself to those outside of engineering, of how engineering can be a family-friendly career. When you look at job postings, it's all full-time, may require overtime. Well, that doesn't scream to me family-friendly. I need weekends off. I need to be able to leave at lunch to pick up my kids some days. So I think, but it is an option. Most jobs do. A lot of jobs and companies will allow you to work part-time if that's what you need, or they will give you flex time or allow you to use your sick time for your children, but they don't advertise that. And I think until it becomes more, they start talking about it more and advertising it more, I think there's going to continue to be a bit of that barrier there for women wanting to enter a job that doesn't appear family-friendly on the surface.
Excellent point. Thank you, Jamie and Kathy, for that insight. For those insights, I'll move to question 2, and then Sasha will weigh in when we start talking about question 2. Now, I'll share my experience with us, how, for me, belonging should be an essential part of equity, diversity, and inclusion. One thing is to have inclusion, another one is for the other party not to have the sense of belonging. So I want to ask you, we want to unpack EDI, the acronym here, to include belonging in our equity, diversity, and inclusion. Katie, let me ask you, how does an individual sense of belonging connect into diversity and inclusion for you? Are there ways we can build stronger environment of inclusion and belonging in engineering?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can go ahead. Katie will comment here.
Sorry. Was that for me? Yes. Then.
Katie, and I was to come back to you. I can let Katie go and then I come back to you.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I would say sense of belonging was it really does tie in, and I didn't appreciate how much sense of belonging, how important that was until I no longer belonged. When I joined engineering, you know, I was like all the other students, I fit in, I knew my place. And then when I got pregnant in my third year, I no longer had that sense of belonging. And I didn't realize that it was something that could be missing. You know, group projects, I could no longer do group projects after 8 o'clock because I had a newborn. I could no longer sit through a 3-hour exam because I was 9 months pregnant. I was included in things, you know, they included me in the group project. I was able to write my exam, but the accommodations were not there for my limitations. So everyone knew what my limitations were, but I don't think anyone understood what my limitations were. And so that sense of belonging I never felt it until I entered the workforce. And then everyone else, I once again was like everyone else, and, you know, having families, and I felt that sense of belonging again. So I think one way the university could work on improving that sense of belonging for others is when there are limitations or accommodations required, instead of just knowing what they are, understand what they are and ask the questions to figure out how can you be more inclusive.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. And I want to come back to you, Sasha. For international students or those who are new to Canada or with English as a second language, what are your thoughts or consideration when it comes to sense of belonging in inclusion?
That's a very good question. And like, I got to state the obvious, that sense of belonging, I think to a certain degree, it's incredibly important to all of us in our lives. So drawing on my experience and, you know, growing up in a large European city and then moving at that funny age of 15 to a small city in the prairies, getting immersed into the different culture, having a pretty big language barrier. It is quite a bit of a culture shock, and I found what helped me to overcome that is having that huge gratification of being treated as equal, as well, and have that sense of inclusion that really made me think of myself as a contributing member of that new to me society, rather than being an outsider. Even though I was an outsider, it still kind of pulled me into our society. So, same I look at the international students, those who are maybe not moving to Saskatoon to stay here for the rest of their lives, but at the end of the day, it's still a bit of a home for some amount of time. So my advice, and Kindle, I really liked your comments about jumping 2 feet into the new societies and trying to break through and be part of everything. And I found that it really helped myself as well. So my advice for the students, and I guess for the faculty, is when you find yourself in those new situations, is try to get involved. And the involvement on campus, I found groups like MISA and IEEE, there's various clubs that they're outside of your normal academic life or outside of your work life, but that's where you build those really meaningful relationships that may pull you into that. They might feel you a lot more included and provide that sense of belonging. I always laugh when I moved to Saskatoon, picking up a hockey stick and never playing hockey, even though I'm Russian, which is really funny. That was the best thing I've done, just because I got to meet so many people that I normally wouldn't have not met anywhere else. So for everybody who's maybe in a position of power, who is very established here, I think we have to recognize that when we're dealing with people who are coming here from other places, that sense of belonging might be very important. And what can we do to help accommodate or maybe nudge people in the right direction, or just embrace them into our society?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sasha. That it's good to know that at least we all agree that it makes sense to introduce this B to the acronym, to call it equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I want to see what Jamie has to say about it. Do you also see any sense in adding B to this acronym and have belonging as part of equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, the question I just wanted to just quickly have your view about this belonging. What's your view about sense of belonging as being an important component of EDI?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Katie and Sasha just said. Like, it is important to feel that you're part of a team. And I like the hockey analogy. That is, for me as a woman, there is things that I participate in and conversations. Like, my husband's into hockey, but I'm not. But I mean, I join in the conversations at work, and there's some things just to get. And they actually asked me about The Bachelor or something. Like, there's this crisscross of interest that we can make each other feel belong, like a piece, like a part of the team included. And I think belonging is super important in your team. We do a lot of team building, I guess. I think that really helps with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate that. And that's it. I'm really pleased that all the three of us agree that belonging is very important. When I moved to Canada, I had no idea about football. I don't even know how to watch football. I don't know what to look out for. But when I was working at the University of Manitoba, and when I'm talking with my colleagues, if there was a game over the weekend, everybody's talking about the football. And I had nothing to say. So I have to develop the habit of watching football so that when they are talking about football, I could be able to talk about football. And then with that, I had that sense of belonging. And then I became part of the team. And I hope our student will take something very important from this. That's really quite important. So I go to question number 3. Now the question is, why are workplaces factoring equity, diversity, and inclusion in their hiring practices? How is this done? How will you respond to those who say these actions are contrary to equity? Sasha, do you want to start? Do you have any experience in your team? Hire intakes or other thought to share about people coming to say that this is contrary to counterproductive?
You know how I alluded already, I was really fortunate in my life to work in the places that were very inclusive, and they did adhere to those principles. What I saw is that there is a definite, but there's an economic positive output too when we talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Because at the end of the day, when you have somebody who is happy to come to work, who feels valued in a safe environment, the natural response is to actually consistently be part of a team, which in turn creates a very productive workforce. So what I personally saw in my career so far is that the successful leaders were the leaders that recognized and celebrated diversity. In relation to hiring, so when somebody's in a position of power and they're a leader and they're trying to build this diverse, well-rounded team, part of it is filling in the positions with the right people. So what I find is that the hiring process inherently reflects that. So people, obviously, I got to make a note that professional like engineering, there's some minimum requirements that need to be met. However, just I'm looking at the audience here, there's a lot of students that are gearing out for their co-op terms, for their internships, they're looking beyond their studies and they're ready to enter the workforce. I want you to look into these principles not as a restrictive principles. They're not going to be restricting your opportunities. It's actually going to open a lot of doors because people are going to be looking beyond. People in the hiring, they look at people who will mesh well into their organizations. And if they are truly adhering to those principles, those are the places you want to work for. And those are the places where you will be successful. So I'm hoping that's answering the question, but what I see is that there's a strength in diversity. And then for students, that's going to open a lot of doors, and it is an opportunity rather than something that's restrictive.
Thank you. That's great. Jamie, I'll come back to you. How does Crescent Point Energy build EDI into people and project strategies?
So I was just going to answer a little bit on the first question. I have an experience, I think, that'll resonate with everybody. I think we should remember that it only takes one person or one leader to kind of break down those barriers and open up the path and consider EDI when they're hiring. And I guess from my own personal experience, I went through and I had a leader that demonstrated that for me. So I was 4 months pregnant at my previous job, and I was interested in coming to Crescent Point. And I gave the contact I had there call and said, I'm pregnant, but over my mat leave, I'd be interested if a position came up, give me a call. And she was like, why don't you just come now? And I counted myself out again. And I think I felt guilty for going on mat leave, which is ridiculous. And she said to me, we're not looking for a year term here. We're looking for a long-term ops eng position. So keep that in mind. So I think just remember that it only takes one person. And in hindsight, if I wouldn't have taken that job, there wasn't many jobs come up after that. So she broke down the barriers and allowed me to have that opportunity. And I think everybody needs to remember that you have, whether or not other leaders are doing it or not, we have the control over that. And I think, why is it important? We've talked about it lots. The diversity is, builds the most efficient teams.
Yeah.
And how is this done? So I think being self-aware really helps you remove those biases when you're hiring. We take unconscious bias training actually at Crescent Point to make sure that we're conscious of that, I guess. One roadblock I want to mention is that, when I'm hiring for an ops eng engineer in Southeast Sask, just talking about gender inequality, 80 to 90% of those resumes are male and 10 to 20 are female. So I think what we need to be doing is promoting getting those resumes more diverse, right? Because I think for myself, to that question on, do you think these actions are contrary to equality? I, as a woman, want to be hired, not because I'm a woman. I want to be hired because I'm the best person for the job. I don't want to be promoted because I'm a woman. I want to be the best person for the job. So I think the best way to do that is have diverse resumes coming in, which leads to getting to the kids young and making sure they're playing with different toys and not pigeonholed a certain direction. But to your question of how Crescent Point does this, so I think we're just getting into this. Last few years, we've made huge strides. But what we do have, we actually set a bar and tie EDI to performance. So our performance ratings, we have CARE attributes. So it's collaboration, agility, results, and ethics. And the agility part of that is diversity of thought. So we actually tie it back to performance. We also have lots of training opportunities. So like I said, that unconscious bias training and different leadership training throughout, and just promoting the diverse teams. But another thing that we did this year, which is really interesting for women, is we have a women leadership network. And in this, it kind of goes back to my first question, seeing women in these roles, like 33% of our board is women, and our chair of our board is a woman, and we have executive. I just felt super inspired. So seeing other people and race and gender in these roles really promotes it within the company. And it's just the first step, I think, in diversity for Crescent Point. But we're going the right direction, so it's exciting.
Absolutely, I agree that it's actually very beneficial, not counterproductive, and that's true. Nobody's asking to be hired because of a particular being a member of the minority group, but take a look at me and see what I can offer in this position, and that resonates a lot with me. That takes me to the next question. We talk about people in leadership position or occupying some space, taking EDI, as something that they have to follow through. But right now, we can see that collectively, organizations are looking to moving EDI to a share priority that can be carried forward by everyone, as opposed to only a selected few. Now, I want to ask Jamie. I want to start with your thought on this. How can students give support when we're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion? Does it start with professors or the staff? Can students also be part of this discussion and also play their part in promoting EDI, even among themselves?
Yeah, I think every individual and organization needs to strive to be an ally to people that are part of diverse groups or have diverse backgrounds. And I think simply we need to participate, learn, educate ourselves, listen, and remember that comfort and growth don't coexist. So if you're going into you're going to support somebody in a conversation because of their diverse opinion or background, it might not be comfortable. It's probably going to be uncomfortable, but as you continue to grow in your diversity and your EDI development, it's going to get more comfortable. So I think you should push yourself out of your comfort zone and go and support all the diverse backgrounds and ideas and experiences.
Thank you. Katie, do you have any thought on this? On this suggestion that this should be a shared responsibility, not just reserved to some people who occupy some position in organizations.
Yeah, I think it's always good to be an advocate for others. It's when someone is in a marginalized minority, they sometimes have a hard time speaking out for themselves out of fear. And I think it's good for others to take their position of privilege and use it for good. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Sasha, do you have a thought on that? You know, I share with us my experience with a student design group where one of them actually feel marginalized because of the fact that she belonged to the minority within that group. And I see it as it should be everybody's responsibility to make sure that we promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. So do you also think that, yeah, that should be a shared responsibility, not just for those who are occupying certain positions in organization? Sasha?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Jamie and Katie. I really like your comment, Jamie, on the leadership, just because it's, we're, especially now in the workforce, at some point, everybody is a leader. And there's, being a steward of doing the right thing and following the right moral compass. I think that's something that all of us it's our own due diligence for everyone. And I guess one thing I do note, with our audience of students, that sometimes it could be, I guess, maybe uncomfortable if you're put in that uncomfortable situation. But I just urge everybody to kind of follow their heart. Even if you're not in a position of power, I think it is incredibly important to take whatever steps you can to kind of bring those principles of EDI into the workplace or into just the general, I guess, atmosphere of a classroom or whatever the setting is where you see the improvement should occur. Did that answer the question?
Yeah,
I guess
that's
so.
good. I think I'm really pleased to know that we all agree that it's a shared responsibility. Everybody has a role to play in promoting EDI in every. That's the point that I take from everyone. Then lastly, I have this question here. Some organizational leaders require us to identify deficiency in an organization and help colleagues to overcome them and thrive using discussions around inclusion. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this approach? How is performance related to EDI? Like colleagues identify the deficiency or weakness of colleagues and discussing, setting up discussion around them to help to overcome barriers and deficiencies. Do we think that performance can be related to EDI? And I'll start with Sasha. Do you have any comment or thought on this?
I do. I definitely do, because like I always said, the successful workforce must be diverse workforce. I think it's pretty funny. Like referring back to Jamie's comment, I really liked about having two people alike with the same thought. You only need one. And honestly, I see it in my job. I've saw it when you have a group of, I'll pick on myself, or similar thinking individuals sitting in the room. It's really hard to break out of our own constraints. So when you have a more diverse group, you do have that differences of opinion. You do have depending on everybody's backgrounds, people draw on their different life experiences. And ultimately in engineering, it helps a lot, because what we do in engineering, we solve problems, right? So depending on, I guess, what you're who you're employed with or what your role is, at the end of the day, you're still solving problems. And solving the problem just with yourself and a clone of 10 of yourself might not be the most efficient way of doing it, at least for me. So I find it's incredibly important. And just looking at the organizations that go, when they work in a very unique geographical location, a lot of people go and hire local advisors, local labor, and they do it not just for economic reasons or for political reasons. They do it because that's what brings diversity into the project team. So I guess that kind of wraps up my question. So I think that's incredibly important, and I can't reiterate enough that successful workforce has to be diverse workforce.
Absolutely. You know, A's strength might be the B's weakness, and B's weakness, strength might be the A's weakness. So when we work together, when there is inclusion, we can all make the organization to move on. You know, Jamie, do you have any thoughts on this? How is performance related to EDI?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like when you talk about having somebody come help identify deficiencies, I think feedback is how you're going to move forward. So having somebody help you, give you some critical feedback, make you more self-aware of some of your biases. Sometimes you need help with that. And I think I totally agree with having somebody come in to do that, because that's how you're going to progress. Tying it to performance, I agree with Sasha. The best teams are diverse, and having all the same thinking people around the table isn't probably going to give you the most efficient result. So I think tying it to a performance just helps promote and have everybody and motivate them towards being aware of the diversity and inclusion piece of it. So yeah, I think performance is definitely related to EDI.
Thank you, everyone. And those are great responses to those questions that we have developed. But now we are going to move on to some of the questions that the student himself have asked. So I will read out the questions, and whoever is more comfortable with the question can just pick the question and speak to those questions. Our time is fast spent, but I want to take as many of them as possible. And so if somebody has answered it, unless you strongly have something else to add to that, then you can add to it. So I'm going to start with the first question I have here. What specific step can someone take to ensure that all individuals feel included and accepted? How can someone act in the moment when an issue arises? Yeah, go ahead, Jamie. Yeah.
I think one of the things is just actually voice it. Like I had said before, like actually when you stand up for someone, it's not just standing behind them, it's actually agreeing with them and being there to support them. So I think actually taking action to participate and voice support would help.
So just participating, doing the right thing when issues arises. That's correct. Any strong addition to that? Otherwise, I move to the next question. Okay, let's move to the next question. Question number 2 from the student. How do you handle a work environment where there is a belief in diversity and inclusion, but you do not feel that it has been implemented enough? So there is this talk about EDI, but you feel that it's not being implemented enough. It's not giving the well-deserved attention. Yes, Katie.
I think the biggest thing is to ask if you feel that you are not being accommodated or that there's not the inclusion that you need. I think you need to ask for it. There's often the perception that, oh, it's never been done before, so they're not gonna be okay with this accommodation that I need. But most workplaces are actually pretty accommodating. You just need to ask.
Just need to ask. Just to assume, ask. Thank you. Now I'm going to go to the next question there. And maybe Sasha will want to wait on this. How is the field of engineering changing to be more inclusive for minorities in Canada?
No, well, that one it's pretty interesting. So when I was, I'm almost going backwards in that question, is because when I started my career in engineering in Altalink, my first manager who was a professional engineer, she was a woman. So that was, to me, that seemed very normal, right? Because I didn't know any better. Now, the interesting setup there was too that her manager, so her direct director, she was also an engineer and she was also a woman. And the vice president of our department, she was also a woman. She was not an engineer, but she had a very wealth of experience in the computer industry, which is also male dominated. So I'm almost not speaking on like what my experience, what I see, what changed, but it's almost a testament that things are changing. Maybe they're changing not fast enough. That's probably the case. But you know, even for myself, there's something, you know, I went through my first 4 years before becoming a professional engineer, reporting to 3 level of very strong, very educated women in power, which now makes it so much more normalized for me. Like, to me, it's no different than, you know, now I'm reporting to a manager who's a man. But like, to me, that I don't see any difference in it, even though maybe going back 20, 30 years ago, that wouldn't be the case. So answering that question, I'm going to be optimistic and say that I hope things are changing, and they're changing for the better. And I think just all of us in the room, I think we can do our part into expediting this process. So thanks.
Yeah, I actually see improvements over the years myself too, and I know it's going to change in the positive direction. And I just encourage those who are minorities, those who are international trained, not to give up, to just keep pushing. I found myself there immediately I joined Apex. I became very active in Apex. Within 10 years, I became a fellow of Engineer Canada. It's just because I will not be an outsider. I just have to keep on pushing, and the system is welcoming. That's really good. Thank you for that. The next question I have, if you still have some time, what should an engineering company value more when hiring employees? Race, gender, diversity, or course grades, technical skills, and experience? That's a question from one of our students. So what should people value most? Anyone want to take that one? Yes, go ahead,
Yeah.
Jamie.
I think it comes back to my comment that I don't want to be promoted or hired because I am a woman. I think ideally when you're looking at resumes, the ultimate equality and inclusion is not seeing any of that. Not seeing race, not seeing, just everybody's on an even playing field when it comes to, in your experiences, and it should be a combination of experience, views, perspectives, right, that kind of lead the pack. I obviously want to be conscious of EDI, and those experience and different gender and race is going to have you give you the diversity and perspective that you want in your team, but it shouldn't come straight down to that, I don't think.
Absolutely. That's why I like the idea of unconscious bias training that you talk about. Sometimes we don't know we have biases. And then until when you go through that training, I've gone through that training myself, that I realized, oh my goodness, there are some unconscious bias in me that could go into decision making, that could even affect picking the right person, because you are some bias against certain things. And that is important. Katie, I know you want to speak to this.
I just want to add on that a bit too. And I think the one thing with experience is it's such a subjective term, in that experience is very important, but experience could be technical experience or experience dealing with difficult people. And those are two, depending on the position, you might value experience dealing with difficult people over your lifetime for a project manager position over the technical experience, because engineering is more than just numbers. It's also dealing with people as well.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Thanks, Katie. I will move on. I want to take some of those questions. And this is actually of interest to me.
Dr. Odeshi, I'm just going to flag, I've received a question from a student in the audience live here. So maybe this could be our final closing one before we wrap up. So
Okay.
I'll read it out if that's okay with you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Do the panelists encourage students to disclose their minority, ethics, disabilities, or gender while applying to a job? Is this a common practice or something that they should do?
To our panelists, we can take that question. Okay, Sasha, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm probably not the most competent person to answer this, because obviously I'm not an HR specialist, but I think that disclosure should be a very personal. So if somebody chooses to do so, I think they should be encouraged to do that, because the reason why I'm saying it, there is identifying yourself could be very important for some people, just for their self-identity, and bringing that to an employer. At first, it should not be it shouldn't be a deterrent not to do it, I think, in my opinion. And as a person who kind of went through a few rounds of hiring on both sides, right? That's somebody identifying in no way, shape, or form. It is a disadvantage to do so. The other thing is we're talking. I like the previous question as well. And we're talking about the experiences and something that our background and our upbringing has a direct correlation with what experience we have. And for a lot of, let's say, students as they're applying to jobs, they might not have that full picture of what the employer is actually looking for. So maybe something that is your background is actually incredibly important to the employer and for the position that they're trying to fulfill. Maybe they are looking for somebody who has that tied to the diversity and have personal experience with whatever that is. So I think, sorry, long story short, I think people, my personal belief, people should include that if they're feeling comfortable. And yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to use the opportunity to thank our panelists. Our time is fast spent. Thank you all for your thoughts, which are really very important to us, to our students, even to faculty who are with us today. I want to say thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand over back to the chair. You're muted.
Of course, that's got to happen once at every virtual event or meeting. All right. Well, I just wanted to close this out by saying thank you, Dr. Odeshi, for acting as our moderator, and of course, to each of our panelists for participating today. That was a very insightful discussion, and I hope that students viewing live or the recording take lots away from that they can start carrying into their educational journey and into industry. And finally, our big thanks to Crescent Point Energy for joining as a partner of the session today and helping to make this possible for students. So with that, students, final housekeeping notes. You should have already received your quiz for the session today, and tomorrow you'll receive the recording link as well as all the previous quizzes and the materials that you need to carry through safety days. So we will see you tomorrow for environmental health and safety. So thanks again, everyone, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was great. Honestly, I didn't, the personal stories are my favorite to hear, what people experience going through like their studies and finding jobs and all of that. That's really interesting and insightful for students. So thank you, you guys. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you too.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And I guess I will see lots of you at the panel on Friday as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't believe I said I can attend that.
Okay, beautiful. Happy to have you. Oh, we're getting lots of thanks from students in here.
That's great.
Yeah, some of them are coming through straight to me, but I'll share the thanks with everybody.
That was good. That was my first time moderating an event like this. I'm normally very shy. I'm a very shy person, but and then Richard just threw me to it. I said, "Yeah, I can do all things. Let me try."
You did great. I was gonna say, and get used to it. There'll be lots. Maybe it's nice that the test one was in a virtual atmosphere, a good stepping stone. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We still have a couple students on here. I wonder if I can stop recording. I think I have to end the meeting to stop recording. So last call for any of the students that are still on here live. If you wanted to turn on your camera and say hello, or if you had a question, now would be the time. And if not, I will hit end the meeting and boot us all out of here.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you again, guys. Take care. We'll see you Friday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.